About a month ago I made a video about all the times I could find where WWE wrestlers appeared on Saturday Night Live. It's now time for the inevitable follow-up, where we look at SNL cast members who appeared in WWE. Perhaps the most famous time SNL cast members appeared on WWE Raw would be when the current Weekend Update hosts Michael Che and Colin Jost took part in the storyline, leading to them eventually competing at WrestleMania 35. This Mania took place at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey, but had a clear New York aesthetic. I'm going to pull my I'm Not American card here, and maybe you can tell me why that is in the comments. Nevertheless, it made sense for WWE to use famous New York institutions to help promote the show, and SNL proudly hails live from New York. On the March 4th, 2019 edition of Raw, the Weekend Update anchors were announced as the special correspondents for WrestleMania. Jost and Che arrive at Raw, and Stephanie McMahon warns them not to annoy any of the wrestlers, foreshadowing what would later happen with the subtlety of a Triple H sledgehammer through a throne. They play it up that Jost has no idea of the world he's entering into, but Che is a fan who will at least be able to find his way around. Later on we see the two walking down a corridor where they meet some of the roster. Weirdly, the funniest person in the skit is Titus O'Neil, who asks for a photograph, but it becomes clear that he only wants one with Che. Finally, on the same night, Colin Jost comes face to face with Braun Strowman. With Braun already unhappy after a loss earlier in the night, Jost struggles to make small talk with him, and asks the question no wrestler wants to be asked. The question that got Vader imprisoned in Q8 for decking a television host. The question that caused David Schultz to be fired from WWE for slapping 2020 reporter John Stossel. Jost asks Strowman of all people, is any of this stuff even real? Not only is this a strange way to break the fourth wall, hey Colt Cabana, how you doing? But it's also a really odd question to ask a huge angry man who's already looking at you like you're fresh meat in the lion enclosure. Braun proceeds to lift Colin up against the wall to intimidate him. There's a weird cut here on the network version of this, and when we come back, Braun is still holding him up, with the implication being that this lasted through an entire ad break, but I could have got that wrong. Either way, by the time we come back, help has arrived, and Braun threatens to see them at WrestleMania. On the following week's Raw, Che and Jost don't appear, but Braun is interviewed about the incident. Braun shows no remorse for his actions, until a man arrives saying his car has arrived. After an ad break, we jump to the car park, where Braun is presented with a fancy looking sports car as a peace offering. Unfortunately, the note accompanying it is awkward enough to throw Strowman off again, and Braun proceeds to destroy the car, which weirdly became immortalised in plastic in the form of a playset made by Mattel. Colin Jost unwittingly made another mistake, not knowing that if you want to appease Braun Strowman, don't do it through the means of a vehicle, or that vehicle will get these hands. On March 18th next week, Jost and Che don't appear again, but Braun has another interview. In it, Braun weirdly claims that the anchors didn't have the nerve to apologise after the initial incident. But when Braun put him down, the first thing Jost did was apologise. WWE's writing wasn't the most consistent around this time. Braun says that he's so angry he is entering himself into the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal so he can hurt as many people as possible. I don't think I can remember another time someone was so enthusiastic about announcing themselves for a match taking place on the pre-show. Not even the main card. We are talking about Braun Strowman though, who at the previous year's WrestleMania won the tag titles with a child and had to give them up a day later because the kid had school. Strowman was interrupted by the host of WrestleMania 35, Alexa Bliss, who asks for a week to try and make things right. And if you think she'll succeed in this, you clearly haven't watched enough wrestling. Or Jerry Springer. On March 25th Raw, Alexa would attempt to patch things up in her interview segment, A Moment of Bliss. She and Braun had history together, as in 2018, they had teamed up in Season 1 of Mixed Match Challenge, a 12-week mixed tag team tournament that was produced for, of all platforms, Facebook Watch, which was trying to grow by hosting original content. Bliss and Braun would compete as Team Little Big, and would make it to the semi-finals before losing to the eventual tournament winners, Asuka and The Miz. So much of this video sounds like a weird fever dream, but I promise this all happened. Following that tournament, the two would sometimes be reunited, such as on an episode of WWE Network show Ride Along. And in 2020, their friendship would be exploited by Bray Wyatt, who was feuding with Braun. This would eventually lead to the Firefly Funhouse version of Alexa, which at the time of me writing this, could possibly be a thing revisited soon. Bliss's in-ring guest is Brawny the Strowman, and she does a pretty poor job at calming the situation, before throwing to Jost and Che, who are on the SNL set via satellite. Interestingly, the crowd loudly boo the SNL too, and Che looks like he's very aware of that. As previously established, this story has absolutely no subtlety to it, and so Jost does a terrible job at appeasing Braun, leading to him challenging Jost to join the Battle Royal at WrestleMania. Che accepts for him, seemingly basing his logic on the fact that they're screwed either way. Thus, Jost and Che are entered into the Battle Royal. On April 1st, the final Raw before WrestleMania, Jost and Che again didn't appear. Braun destroys two local wrestlers who were clearly meant to represent the Weekend Update anchors. The entirely one-sided beating ends with Braun hitting both with a power slam at the same time and pinning them. Before we get to WrestleMania, I should note here that while Jost and Che were continuing the storyline on social media, none of this was ever brought up on Saturday Night Live. To me, this felt like a massive missed opportunity. You could have done sketches or an update segment where people try and give advice or talk them out of showing up. Sort of like when David Arquette was WCW champion and his then wife Courtney Cox tried to convince him that he's not a wrestler and should get out of the situation before he gets hurt. One day before WrestleMania 31, The Rock hosted Saturday Night Live, and even did one of his most famous SNL sketches based on a WWE promo gone horribly wrong. So I hoped it wouldn't be out of the question for this storyline to bleed over to Studio 8H. So now we get to WrestleMania 35. Jost and Che get their own entrance and quickly hide behind the rest of the entrance as Braun enters. As soon as the opening bell rings, Che and Jost slide under the bottom rope and slink under the ring. A video on WWE's YouTube that I hadn't seen until writing this shows Colin and Michael under the ring as the match happens, with Jost freaking out at all the sounds the ring is making, blaming Che for all of this. Che's plan is to wait until it sounds like there's one guy left and then enter the ring and throw him out. Unfortunately for them, that one man is Braun Strowman. In one final desperate move, Colin takes the microphone and brings a therapist into the ring to try and defuse the situation. Once again, not a lot of nuance here, which is unfortunate because if Braun had listened to the therapist, maybe Control Your Narrative would never have happened. Che attempts to eliminate himself, but gets a slap from Strowman for his efforts, leaving Jost all alone with the monster among men. Jost actually ducks a high kick from Braun, giving him a 1% chance of getting Braun out. But he ends up being launched into orbit by Braun, and caught by several wrestlers as he lands. Thus ends the month of SNL cast members in the WWE storyline. On April 19th, 2010, Will Forte and Kristen Wiig were guest hosts for Raw to promote the critically panned MacGruber film. Forte, in character, manages to irritate Vladimir Kozlov in very much the same fashion Jost did with Braun. MacGruber claims to have planted the arena with explosives and accidentally blows up Vladimir's opponent, R-Truth. I promise you this was presented funnier than it sounds. Prior to this, MacGruber meets Chris Jericho, who is apparently in the film, and not even he can make MacGruber funny. Incidentally, I only learned while writing this video that MacGruber somehow went from being a very repetitive joke on SNL, to a money-losing movie, to a series on Peacock. MacGruber was supposed to wrestle Kozlov, but he was replaced by Kaluba, the great Khali in costume. Khali chases Kozlov up the ramp, leading to both men getting counted out, and somehow MacGruber claims victory. To wrap this up, and also my previous video about WWE and SNL, when the two interact, it often feels weird and slightly awkward for one or both audiences. Nowadays, they both fall under the Peacock umbrella, so we might someday get a crossover that pushes both brands. There are loads of WWE wrestlers I'd love to see on the stage of 8H. The New Day in particular would maybe do well. And I bet some of the modern SNL cast could hold their own in the WWE ring. I'd love to see Bowen Yang or Cecily Strong get involved in a WWE storyline. Maybe even grizzled veteran Kenan Thompson. Would you like to see more of a crossover between the two? Tell me which wrestlers you'd like to see host SNL, and what cast members you want to see in the ring. Thank you for watching yet another wrestling channel. If you enjoyed this, please comment, like or subscribe.